She grew up in a small town where life was predictable and rules were everywhere. Every day seemed to follow the same pattern. People expected things to be done in a certain way, and anyone who tried something different was quickly corrected. From the outside, it looked calm and orderly, but for her, it felt like a cage. She could feel her creativity struggling to breathe under all the expectations, even as a child. She noticed details that others ignored. She saw beauty in small things, in ways the world often overlooked. She loved to draw and paint, to experiment with colors and shapes in ways that made sense only to her. But when she showed her work to teachers or family members, she was met with criticism instead of praise. They would shake their heads and tell her to follow the proper methods. That was the rule in her world. Follow instructions. Stay in line. Don't question. Don't innovate. She tried to obey at first. She tried to follow every guideline, every lesson, every rule. But the more she tried, the more she felt herself shrinking inside. Her drawings became stiff. Her paintings looked dull. It was as if the rules were sucking the life out of her work. Still, she kept practicing because she knew she loved creating. Even if others didn't appreciate it, it gave her a sense of freedom that she couldn't find anywhere else. At school, she was a quiet student. She did well in her lessons because she wanted to please her teachers. But in the art room, she could feel a spark that no one else seemed to notice. She would sit at her desk during breaks, sketching anything that came to her mind. Sometimes she drew landscapes that didn't exist, sometimes faces with expressions that seemed alive. She even started making little sculptures from clay, bending and shaping them into forms that no one had ever seen before. Each creation made her heart race with excitement, but she kept it hidden. The fear of being scolded was always there, whispering that she was doing something wrong. Her parents were kind, but traditional. They loved her, but they wanted her to follow the safe path. They would tell her, "Stick to what you know. Don't waste time on things that won't help you in the future." She tried to explain her passion, but they couldn't see what she saw. To them, art was just a hobby, not a way to build a life. This left her feeling torn. She wanted their support, but she also wanted to follow her heart. As she grew older, the pressure to conform became stronger. Teachers reminded her constantly that there was a right way to do everything. When she experimented with techniques in painting, they criticized her for being messy or careless. When she used unusual colors, they said it didn't make sense. It felt like every creative choice was being judged. Each criticism chipped away at her confidence, but it also fueled a quiet rebellion inside her. She began to think, why should I follow rules that don't make sense to me? Why can't I create my own way? She started spending more time alone, seeking spaces where she could express herself without judgment. In her bedroom, she would turn old notebooks into sketchbooks, filling them with pages of imagination. She would paint late into the night, listening to music that inspired her, letting her hands move freely without thinking about rules. These moments were her sanctuary. The outside world could not reach her here. Her imagination could run wild, painting visions that were entirely her own. Sometimes she would take small risks, showing a drawing to a friend or a family member who she thought might understand. Some smiled politely, others didn't know how to respond. It was disappointing at times, but it also taught her to rely less on approval and more on her own satisfaction. She realized that the joy of creating was enough for her. She didn't need everyone else to validate it. This was a turning point. She began to understand that her work had its own value, separate from what others thought. School projects were a challenge. Teachers wanted everyone to follow the same pattern, to produce similar results. She hated it. She wanted to create something unique, but she was careful not to attract too much attention. She would sneak in her own ideas, making subtle changes that reflected her vision without breaking the rules entirely. It was a delicate balance, but she was learning how to express herself even within constraints. Every small victory gave her confidence, proving that creativity could find a way even in a restrictive, dire environment. Her friends didn't always understand her passion. Some laughed at her ideas, saying they were strange or pointless. She learned to ignore the laughter and focus on what made her happy. In quiet moments, she would imagine a future where she could create without fear, where her work could be seen and appreciated for what it truly was. These dreams became a source of motivation. They reminded her that the rules of today didn't have to define tomorrow. As she grew more skilled, she realized that her creativity was not just a hobby, it was a part of who she was. It gave her a voice in a world that often tried to silence her. She began to think more seriously about the path she wanted to take. Could she find a way to share her work with the world without losing herself? Could she create something that was truly hers? Something that would make people stop and take notice? There were moments of doubt, of course. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, and fear of breaking the rules lingered in her mind. But each time she faced these fears, she felt a small spark of courage. She realized that risk was part of the process. Without risk, there could be no growth. Without courage, there could be no masterpiece. These thoughts pushed her forward, shaping her into someone ready to challenge expectations. One day, she discovered a new art technique through a book she found in a dusty corner of the library. It was unconventional, something no teacher had ever suggested. She felt a rush of excitement and curiosity. This technique seemed to align with her vision, a way to express ideas that had been trapped inside her for years. She started experimenting in secret, learning the nuances, and discovering her own style. Each attempt brought new insights, and even mistakes became valuable lessons. She was learning that creation was not about perfection. It was about honesty, emotion, and connection. Her work began to evolve. What had started as small sketches and experiments became more complex and meaningful. She poured herself into her art, letting it reflect her thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Every brushstroke, every line, every color choice was a statement of her identity. She felt alive in a way she had never experienced before. Art was no longer just a passion, it was her way of speaking to the world. Yet the rules still loomed over her life. Teachers continued to emphasize conformity, family reminded her of practicality, and friends often questioned her choices. Despite this, she kept moving forward. She learned to navigate the delicate balance between respect for tradition and the need for self-expression. She understood that her journey would not be easy, but she was determined to follow her heart as the years passed. Her talent became undeniable, even if it was still largely hidden. People began to notice glimpses of her skill, though most still expected her to play it safe. Deep down, she knew that one day she would have to take a stand, to show the world the true extent of her creativity. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement at the thought. The rules might try to hold her back, but she had learned that her spirit could not be contained in her quiet moments. She would imagine standing before an audience, sharing her work without hesitation. She pictured the reactions, the awe, the surprise, and the admiration. These visions became her motivation, a promise to herself that she would not settle for mediocrity. She would create something unforgettable, something that would break the boundaries imposed on her since childhood. Part of her journey was also understanding the value of patience. She learned that mastery takes time, that every mistake, every failed attempt, and every criticism was a stepping stone towards something greater. She embraced the process, understanding that the rules she defied were not just obstacles, they were challenges that would make her eventual triumph. Even more powerful, by the end of her childhood and early teenage years, she had transformed from a quiet, obedient girl into someone quietly rebellious. Someone who nurtured her talents in secret. Someone who understood the power of her own voice. She had discovered that while rules could guide, they could not define her. Her creativity was her own, and she knew that one day it would shine in a way that no one could ignore, even though the world around her continued to emphasize tradition and caution. She felt ready to step beyond it. She had built a foundation of skill, resilience, and imagination. She had learned to listen to herself, to trust her instincts, and to value her vision. The stage was not yet set, the audience not yet assembled, but she was ready. The first part of her journey had prepared her for what was to come. The moment when she would defy the rules and create something truly breathtaking, she had learned to keep her most daring ideas hidden. But the desire to create in her own way was growing stronger every day. The rules that had always held her back now felt more like chains that needed to be broken. In the quiet of her room, she spent hours sketching, painting, and experimenting with forms that seemed impossible to others. It was a private world where she could breathe freely, a place where imagination had no limits. At first, she approached this secret world cautiously. She would try something new, then hide it if she thought it was too bold. Sometimes she would crumple paper or erase entire sketches, thinking no one could ever understand what she was trying to do. But slowly, she began to trust her instincts. She realized that the most powerful work came from following her own vision, not trying to meet someone else's expectations. One evening, she discovered a combination of techniques she had never seen before. It was a mix of colors, textures, and forms that seemed to move when she looked at them. Her heart raced as she realized that she was creating something entirely original. The excitement was intoxicating. She worked late into the night, ignoring hunger and fatigue, driven by a need to bring her ideas to life. Every stroke, every line, every detail mattered to her. It was as if the work itself had taken control of her hands. As she created, she began to notice changes in herself. She felt more confident, more alive, and more connected to her purpose. The act of breaking rules in her private world gave her a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. It was exhilarating, but also frightening. She knew that if anyone saw her work before it was ready, they might not understand. They might even discourage her. The thought of being judged before she could finish filled her with anxiety, but it could not stop her. She found solace in small victories. When a sketch came out the way she imagined, she would smile quietly to herself. When a color combination surprised her in a beautiful way, she would feel a rush of joy that no praise from others could match. These moments became her motivation. She started keeping a notebook where she wrote down ideas and plans for future projects. It was her private manifesto, a guide for her secret rebellion against the rules that had always tried to contain her. Outside her room, life continued as usual. School and family demanded her attention, and the pressures of conforming never fully disappeared. But she began to see that she could live in both worlds. In one, she followed expectations and kept up appearances. In the other, she allowed herself to dream and create without restraint. The contrast between the two made her feel more alive, more aware of her own potential. Sometimes she would take walks in the evenings to clear her mind. She noticed patterns in the world around her, shapes in the clouds, shadows on the walls, the way light danced on the water. These observations became inspiration for her work. She learned to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, to find beauty in details that others overlooked. Her creativity was not just a hobby anymore. It was a lens through which she viewed the entire world. Despite the joy of creation, fear was always present. Fear that her secret world would be discovered, fear that her work was not good enough, fear that she would fail if she ever tried to share it. She learned to live with this fear, using it as a reminder of what mattered most. Each time she felt afraid, she pushed herself a little further, experimenting with new techniques, new ideas, new expressions. Fear became a companion, not an enemy. She also began to connect with other artists online, quietly observing their work and learning from their techniques. She never shared her own work publicly, but she absorbed ideas and inspiration from the creativity of others. This connection, though distant, gave her a sense of community. She realized that art was not just about personal expression, it was part of a larger conversation that crossed boundaries and cultures. Her imagination expanded as she explored new styles, new mediums, new perspectives. Her secret projects grew more ambitious. She started to create pieces that told stories, capturing emotions, moments, and experiences in ways that words could not. Each work became a reflection of her inner world, a testament to her courage and persistence. She began to understand that true artistry was not about following rules, but about conveying truth, emotion, and individuality. Even though she worked mostly alone, she began to notice subtle changes in how others responded to her. A teacher might glance at her sketchbook with mild curiosity. A friend might compliment a small detail in a drawing, or a parent might remark on her focus and dedication. These small acknowledgments gave her confidence, but they did not define her. She had learned that the deepest satisfaction came from within, from the knowledge that she was creating something authentic. Her experiments sometimes failed spectacularly. Colors clashed, forms collapsed, ideas fell apart. At first, these failures discouraged her, but over time, she began to see them differently. Each failure was a lesson, a step toward mastery. She learned to embrace imperfection, understanding that the process of creation was as important as the finished work. She realized that true innovation often emerged from mistakes. From the courage to try something no one had done before, she also began to explore materials she had never used. She discovered that textures, surfaces, and even everyday objects could add depth and emotion to her work. She experimented with layering paint, scratching surfaces, and combining unexpected elements. The results were sometimes messy, sometimes chaotic, but always alive. Each experiment brought her closer to finding her own unique voice, a voice that no rules could silence. As her skills developed, she started to imagine sharing her work with the world. The idea terrified her. What if people didn't understand? What if they laughed or dismissed her? What if the rules caught up with her? But at the same time, she felt a growing excitement. The thought of showing her work, of letting others see her true vision, filled her with anticipation. She realized that fear and excitement were two sides of the same coin. Both indicated that she was on the right path. She began to plan a project that would combine all her skills, all her experiments, all her ideas into one cohesive piece. It would be her masterpiece, a work that reflected everything she had learned and everything she had dreamed of. She worked quietly, meticulously, and with growing determination. Every decision, every stroke, every detail mattered. She knew that this project would define her, and she was ready to face the challenges it would bring. Her private world became richer, more complex, and more fulfilling. She no longer saw her creativity as a secret hobby. It was a vital part of her identity, a force that gave her strength and purpose. The more she immersed herself in her work, the more she realized that she could not live without it. Her art was not just a way to express herself, it was a way to survive, to grow, and to thrive. The rules of her world still loomed large, but she felt increasingly ready to confront them. She understood that breaking the rules would not be easy, and that it would come with risks. But she also knew that the rewards could be extraordinary. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. And she was ready to act. In the quiet of her room, surrounded by sketches, paints, and notes, she felt a sense of clarity. She knew who she was, what she wanted, and where she was headed. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was hers to take. She had discovered that her creativity could not be contained, that her vision was too powerful to be ignored. And so, with a mixture of fear, excitement, and determination, she continued her journey, quietly rebelling against the rules and preparing for the moment when her true work would finally be seen by the world. The day finally arrived when an opportunity presented itself, an event where everyone expected her to follow the rules, to play it safe, to produce work that fit within the lines set by others. It was a public exhibition organized by her school, and students were asked to present their art in the traditional style. She knew that most people would follow the rules without question, producing pieces that were predictable and conventional. She also knew that if she conformed, her work would blend into the background, unseen and unnoticed. The thought of being invisible was unbearable. For weeks she prepared in secret. She worked late into the night, carefully planning every element of her creation. It was bold, unlike anything the audience had seen before. She used techniques she had discovered during her private experiments, combining colors, textures, and forms in ways that were unconventional and daring. Each stroke, each layer, each detail was deliberate, a reflection of her inner vision. She felt a mixture of excitement and fear. She knew she was breaking the rules, and that breaking the rules could have consequences. On the day of the exhibition, she arrived early. The room was filled with art neatly framed and displayed, all conforming to the expected standards. She noticed the teachers inspecting the works, nodding in approval when something met their expectations. The contrast between the conventional pieces and her own creation made her heart race. She felt a surge of nervous energy. What if they didn't understand? What if they dismissed her work as strange or inappropriate? But she reminded herself that her work was hers, and it did not need approval to be meaningful. When it was her turn to present, she carried her piece carefully. It was large, colorful, and full of movement. She set it up in the center of the room, making sure it was visible to everyone. A hush fell over the audience. Whispers started, some of curiosity, others of doubt. She could feel the tension in the air. All eyes were on her, and in that moment, she realized how much courage it took to reveal her work, to defy expectations openly. The room was filled with a mix of excitement and skepticism. And she stood there, steadying herself. As she unveiled her masterpiece, she felt a strange calm settle over her. She had prepared for this moment for months, and now it was happening. The piece was unlike anything the audience had seen. Colors swirled together, creating a sense of depth and emotion that seemed almost alive. Shapes moved across the canvas, telling stories that words could not capture. Every detail was intentional, every element designed to provoke thought and feeling. She watched closely as people began to react. At first, there were murmurs of confusion. Some people frowned, unsure of what they were seeing. They whispered to each other, questioning the choices she had made. The teachers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. But slowly, something began to change. The initial doubt gave way to fascination. People leaned in closer, studying the intricate details. Eyes widened in surprise and then in awe. They were beginning to see the brilliance hidden within the unconventional. To understand the emotion and thought behind each stroke, a teacher who had often criticized her in the past approached. Studying the piece carefully, for a long moment, no words were spoken. Then quietly they said, "I didn't expect this. It's remarkable." The words carried weight, and she felt a rush of validation mixed with relief. She had risked everything by defying the rules, and now the effort was beginning to pay off. The piece was speaking for itself, proving that innovation and courage could surpass expectation. Students who had once doubted her stared in astonishment. Some were speechless, unable to articulate their reactions. Others whispered among themselves, trying to comprehend the originality before them. The atmosphere in the room shifted from skepticism to admiration. Her work was no longer just a display of color and form, it was a statement. A declaration that creativity could not be confined by rules or tradition. She noticed that some younger students were watching her with wide eyes, inspired by her courage. She realized that her choice to present something original was not just about herself. It was about showing others that it was possible to break free from expectations, to trust one's own vision, and to create something meaningful. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of responsibility and connection to everyone in the room. As the exhibition continued, more people came to study her work. Questions were asked, compliments were given, and even the skeptics could not deny the power of what she had created. She saw faces light up with understanding, with awe, and with inspiration. It was a transformative experience, not just for the audience, but for her as well. She realized that the fear she had carried for so long was only a sign that she was doing something important, something that mattered. Throughout the day, she remained present, observing the reactions and feeling the energy in the room. She noticed how her work sparked conversations, how it challenged perceptions, and how it encouraged others to think differently. The experience was unlike anything she had imagined. It was no longer just a personal triumph. It was a shared moment of creativity, discovery, and inspiration. By the end of the exhibition, it was clear that her masterpiece had left a lasting impression. People approached her with admiration and curiosity, asking about her process, her techniques, and her ideas. Even those who had initially doubted her could not hide their respect. The piece had achieved what she had hoped for. It had captured attention, evoked emotion, and provoked thought. It was proof that defying the rules, when done with intention and passion, could create something extraordinary. In the quiet moments after the exhibition, she reflected on what had happened. The fear, the uncertainty, and the risk had all been worth it. She had stepped into the unknown, challenged expectations, and revealed her true vision. The experience taught her that courage was not just about facing fear, it was about trusting oneself, embracing creativity and daring to be different. It was a lesson she would carry forward for the rest of her life. The reactions of the audience, the acknowledgement from teachers, and the inspiration she sparked in others all reinforced a truth she had discovered long ago. Rules could guide. Her creativity, her voice, and her vision were hers to own. By stepping beyond boundaries and embracing her own path, she had shown that originality could be powerful, moving, and transformative. That day marked a turning point in her journey. She had proven to herself and to others that she could create something remarkable on her own terms. The experience fueled her confidence and determination, preparing her for the next stage of her journey. She knew that the road ahead would continue to be filled with challenges, skepticism, and fear. But she also knew that she had the courage, skill, and vision to face whatever came next. As she left the exhibition, she felt a sense of liberation and possibility. She had stepped out of the shadows, defied expectations, and shared her true self with the world. The response had been more than she could have imagined. People were not just impressed, they were moved, inspired, and changed in some small way by her work. It was a moment that she would remember forever, a moment that validated every hour of practice, every risk, and every challenge she had faced. From that day on, she no longer saw the rules as obstacles. She saw them as challenges to be met with creativity, courage, and determination. She realized that breaking rules was not about rebellion for its own sake. It was about honoring one's own vision, expressing truth, and inspiring others. Her masterpiece had become more than art. It was a statement, a declaration that creativity could not be confined, and that the human spirit was capable of extraordinary achievement. The reactions to her masterpiece continued to unfold in ways she had never imagined. After the initial surprise and awe, the audience began to understand the depth and emotion of her work. They leaned closer, studying the intricate details, noticing subtleties they had initially overlooked. Faces that had once been skeptical now reflected amazement, admiration, and even inspiration. It was as though her piece had a life of its own, drawing people in and making them feel something they had not felt before. She watched quietly, allowing the audience to experience her work without interference. Each expression, each gasp, each whispered comment made her heart swell. She realized that her creation was no longer hers alone. It had become a shared experience, a conversation between her and everyone in the room. Her courage to defy the rules had unlocked something extraordinary, a connection that transcended words, age, and expectations. Teachers who had once doubted her now approached with newfound respect. They asked questions, wanting to understand her process, her inspiration, and her choices. Some admitted that they had never seen anything like it, that her creativity had exceeded all expectations. The acknowledgement felt different from praise for following rules. It was genuine recognition for originality, for vision, and for courage. She felt a mixture of pride and humility. Pride in what she had achieved, and humility in realizing the impact her work could have on others. Even her peers, who had once laughed at her unconventional ideas or dismissed her talents, were now engaging with her in ways she had never experienced. They asked her to explain her techniques, to describe her thoughts, and to share her inspirations. Younger students looked up to her, seeing that it was possible to create something unique and powerful. The energy in the room shifted from polite admiration to genuine curiosity, excitement, and even admiration. She had become a source of inspiration, not through conformity, but through courage and authenticity. The most profound moments came when she noticed individuals deeply moved by her work. A student stood silently, tears in their eyes, clearly touched by the emotions conveyed in the piece. A teacher whispered, almost reverently, that it was a piece that would linger in their mind for a long time. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, realizing that the risks she had taken, the fears she had faced, and the rules she had defied had led to something meaningful and transformative. As the day went on, more people came to study her creation. Conversations sparked around her work, discussions about technique, meaning, and emotion. People began to compare it to conventional pieces, and in doing so, they began to appreciate the courage it took to break free from tradition. Her masterpiece became a topic of dialogue, not just a display. It was an experience, a lesson, and a source of inspiration for everyone who encountered it. In quiet moments between the crowd, she reflected on what had happened. She remembered the fear she had felt in the weeks leading up to the exhibition, the sleepless nights spent perfecting her work, and the anxiety of revealing her vision. All of it had been worth it. She had taken a chance, and in doing so, she had created an experience that touched hearts, provoked thought, and inspired others to reconsider what was possible. She understood that her courage had amplified the power of her creativity. The recognition she received was not just personal, it had a ripple effect. Students who had once felt constrained by rules began to see new possibilities. Teachers reconsidered their approach, realizing that creativity could not always be measured by adherence to tradition. The entire atmosphere of the exhibition had shifted, influenced by the boldness of a single piece created by someone willing to trust their own vision. She had changed the room, the audience, and perhaps even the rules themselves, simply by believing in her own ability to create. She also noticed that her own perception of herself had transformed. The doubts and fears that had once dominated her thoughts were now replaced with confidence and clarity. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. She had acted, and in doing so, had discovered the strength and power of her own voice. The experience validated every moment of struggle, every challenge, and every small victory she had experienced along her journey. As people continued to interact with her work, she began to consider the broader impact of creativity. She understood that art was not just about self-expression. It was about connection, inspiration, and transformation. Her work had created a space where emotions, ideas, and imaginations could meet. It had invited people to think differently, to feel deeply, and to consider possibilities beyond the ordinary. In a way, her masterpiece had become a bridge between herself and the world, a bridge built with courage, imagination, and authenticity. The more she observed, the more she realized that her journey was far from over. The exhibition had been a moment of triumph, but it was also a starting point. She had proven to herself and to others that breaking rules and defying expectations could create something extraordinary. Now, she had a responsibility to continue exploring, experimenting, and sharing her vision. Her creativity was not a momentary spark. It was a lifelong pursuit. Later, when the exhibition ended, she took a moment to step back and reflect. The room was quiet now, the energy lingering like a soft hum. She walked past her masterpiece, observing it with a mixture of pride and contemplation. She knew that this was not the end of her journey, but a milestone, a testament to the power of courage, persistence, and authenticity. The rules that had once constrained her now seemed less daunting, less absolute. She understood that rules were meant to be challenged when they limited growth and expression. She also realized that the experience had changed her relationship with fear. Fear had guided her, warned her, and tested her, but it had not stopped her. By confronting fear, she had unlocked new levels of creativity and confidence. She understood that fear was not an enemy, it was a signal that something important was at stake. By embracing it, she could achieve things she had never imagined. The lessons from that day continued to resonate. She learned that originality and courage were inseparable. She understood that creativity required risk, that innovation demanded defiance, and that true expression could not be confined by tradition or expectation. Her masterpiece had not just left an impression on others, it had solidified her belief in herself and her ability to shape the world through her vision. As she left the exhibition hall, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The reactions of the audience, the respect of her teachers, and the inspiration she had sparked in others all reinforced a powerful truth. Creativity, when nurtured with courage and authenticity, could transcend rules, expectations, and limitations. She had experienced it firsthand, and she knew that it was only the beginning. Her journey would continue, filled with challenges, discoveries, and opportunities to inspire and transform. That evening, as she returned to her room and looked at her sketches and unfinished pieces, she felt a sense of anticipation. The world had responded to her vision. She had learned that her courage and creativity were not separate, they were intertwined. Every future project, Every experiment and every act of creation would be informed by the lessons of this day. She had discovered that the true power of art lay not in obedience, but in authenticity, risk, and the willingness to defy expectations. She understood that her masterpiece was more than a piece of art. It was a symbol of courage, creativity, and the human spirit's ability to rise above constraints. It had changed the perception of those who witnessed it, and it had changed her perception of herself. She was no longer just a student following rules. She was an artist shaping her own path, capable of inspiring others and redefining what was possible. The day had proven that when someone dares to defy, to innovate, and to trust their own vision, the results can be breathtaking, transformative, and unforgettable. After the exhibition, her life began to change in subtle and profound ways. The moment she had risked everything by presenting her masterpiece had opened doors she had never imagined. People who had once doubted her now sought her out, eager to understand her vision and to see what she would create next. Teachers encouraged her to continue exploring new techniques. Peers approached her with admiration, and even strangers were inspired by her courage to break free from expectations. She realized that by trusting herself, she had created not only art, but influence and inspiration. She returned to her private workspace, her room now filled with sketches, colors, and ideas that she had once been too afraid to explore. The success of her public reveal gave her confidence to expand her imagination further. She began experimenting with larger projects, combining mediums in ways she had only dreamed of before. Each new project was a challenge, a test of her creativity, but she embraced it with the knowledge that her vision had power, and that she had the ability to touch others through her work as she worked. She noticed the impact of her courage on those around her. Younger students who had seen her masterpiece began to experiment with their own ideas, inspired by her refusal to follow the rules blindly. Some teachers reconsidered the rigidity of their lessons, allowing students more freedom to explore creativity. Her defiance had sparked a ripple effect, showing that courage and authenticity could influence change beyond a single moment or individual. She realized that her actions had a greater meaning than she had anticipated. Despite the recognition and praise, she remained humble. She knew that her journey was far from over. Each new project was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to push the boundaries of her imagination. She continued to experiment, to take risks, and to challenge herself. She understood that the true reward of creativity was not just admiration, but the fulfillment of expressing something genuine, something that resonated deeply within herself and others. The world outside her room had changed as well. Conversations about her work continued long after the exhibition ended. People discussed the emotions it evoked, the techniques she had used, and the boldness of her choices. She overheard students talking about trying things differently, teachers reflecting on how to nurture creativity, and friends expressing their admiration for her courage. It was clear that her work had made a lasting impression, not just as a piece of art, but as a catalyst for change. She began to see herself not just as a student or an artist, but as a storyteller. Her work conveyed messages, emotions, and ideas that could influence others. Each brushstroke, each colored choice, and each design element was a part of a larger narrative about courage, authenticity, and the power of imagination. She understood that her art could inspire action, provoke thought, and challenge conventions. This realization deepened her commitment to her craft, and she approached each new project with renewed purpose and vision. Her parents, who had once worried about her unconventional path, began to understand the depth of her talent and the impact of her courage. They saw how her creativity brought joy, inspiration, and recognition. They realized that her defiance of the rules was not rebellion for its own sake, but a necessary step toward discovering her true potential. Their support, though cautious at first, became a source of encouragement, allowing her to continue pursuing her dreams with more confidence. Over time, she began to participate in more exhibitions, workshops, and collaborative projects. Each experience tested her skills, creativity, and courage in new ways. She met other artists who challenged her ideas, inspired her experiments, and offered perspectives she had never considered. She learned that creativity was not just a solitary endeavor, but a dialogue, a shared journey where ideas could grow and evolve through collaboration and exploration. Her confidence in breaking rules became a defining aspect of her approach, allowing her to create work that was authentic and impactful. Despite her growing recognition, she never lost sight of the lessons she had learned in her private experiments. She remembered the long nights of trial and error, the fear of being misunderstood, and the joy of discovering something entirely her own. These memories grounded her, reminding her that true creativity required patience, courage, and dedication. She understood that success was not just measured by recognition, but by the depth of connection her work created and the authenticity it embodied. As her reputation grew, she also became aware of the responsibility that came with influence. People looked to her as an example of courage and originality. Younger students sought her guidance, peers sought her advice, even teachers sought her perspective on nurturing creativity. She embraced this role with humility, offering encouragement, sharing insights, and demonstrating that the path of authenticity, though challenging, was rewarding and transformative. Her work continued to evolve. Reflecting her growth as an artist and as an individual, she experimented with new materials, themes, and forms. Each project became a journey of discovery, a process of pushing boundaries and exploring possibilities. She learned to embrace failure as a teacher, to see challenges as opportunities, and to recognize that courage was a continuous practice, not a single act. Her art became a reflection of her journey, a testament to the power of perseverance, vision, and authenticity. She also discovered that creativity was not limited to the canvas or the studio. It influenced how she approached life, relationships, and challenges. She became more confident in expressing her thoughts, more empathetic in understanding others, and more resilient in facing obstacles. The lessons learned through art, courage, patience, experimentation, and authenticity became guiding principles for her life. She realized that creativity was not just a skill, but a way of living, a mindset that could transform her world and the world around her. Years passed and her journey continued to unfold. Each new project, each exhibition, each interaction reinforced the importance of trusting her vision and embracing her individuality. She had become more than an artist. She had become a source of inspiration, a catalyst for change, and a testament to the power of defying expectations. Her masterpiece had been the beginning, a spark that ignited a lifetime of creativity, courage, and connection. Looking back, she understood that the rules that once constrained her had served a purpose. They had tested her, challenged her, and strengthened her resolve. But she also understood that rules were not absolute. They could be bent, challenged, or transcended when they limited growth, creativity, and self-expression. Her journey had shown her that true mastery came from balancing respect for guidance with the courage to innovate. From honoring tradition while embracing individuality, the impact of her work extended beyond her personal achievements. It inspired others to take risks, to pursue their passions, and to trust their instincts. Her courage created a ripple effect, encouraging people to explore, experiment, and express themselves authentically. She realized that her legacy was not just her art, but the inspiration and empowerment she provided to others. Each new artist who dared to break free, each student who felt encouraged to create, each individual inspired to trust their vision, was a continuation of her journey and her influence. In quiet moments, she reflected on how far she had come. From a child constrained by rules and expectations, she had grown into a confident, courageous, and creative individual. She had faced fear, embraced risk, and defied convention. Her journey was a testament to the power of perseverance, imagination, and authenticity. She had discovered that the greatest achievements were born from courage, so that the most memorable creations came from trusting oneself and daring to defy the rules.